Daniel Suarez will not return to Trackhouse in 2026. How much did Ware Racing sell for? And Legacy Motor Club, they want a third team really soon, apparently. Plus, I saw the Formula One movie. Welcome back to Break Hard. I'm Matt. So this past weekend, we probably had the best drafting track race of the Gen 7 era. I think everybody probably agrees with that one. And we finally found out what the viewership was for Saturday night's race in Atlanta on TNT, and it was 1.6 million viewers, and that is exactly why we don't have Saturday night races very often anymore. They're a rarity these days because Saturday nights are a ratings black hole. Nobody's at home watching, nobody's interested in watching, and you can factor in the fact that it switched from media partners this week. It went from Prime over to TNT. At the same time, though, that's just not a great number. You want to see it up over 2 million, and we certainly didn't get it. All the people that are like, I'm not watching until they're getting off Prime. Well, they're off Prime, so come back and watch, please, maybe. We'll see what happens. But yeah, not the best. Still beat out Formula One, which is to be expected. But that's why they don't race on Saturday nights. That's why you see more Sunday night races or late Sunday evening races at this point than you do Saturday night. We only got 3 this year, Atlanta, Daytona, as well as the Bristol night race. And I would probably argue that you're probably only going to see maybe 2 next year on the schedule at that, which is a bummer, but it is what it is. Now, let's get into what we want to talk about today. We're going to start off with the biggest news story of the week outside of Ware getting absolutely paid, and that is the fact that Daniel Suarez will not return to Trackhouse in 2026. The two sides have mutually agreed to part ways. Daniel Suarez put out a statement on Tuesday, and it's not that surprising, right? I think the writing was on the wall for everybody to see this happening, especially with Connor Zilisch getting more cup starts this year as well. He's got, 2 wins in the Xfinity Series already this season, and he gives you a much better opportunity to lock into the playoffs next year versus Daniel Suarez. I think that it just made sense to make this move, but it's unfortunate for Daniel Suarez because I do think that he's a super formidable race car driver at that, and I hope he finds the landing spot. But in his seasons with Trackhouse, he has recorded 2 wins. He had that Sonoma win back in 2022, and then he obviously won the Atlanta Spring Race in 2024 in that wild 3-wide finish. But he has struggled to find pace at times, and especially keep up with his teammate Ross Chastain. I will say he started off 25 really fast, had a lot of unfortunate situations happen, got caught up on other people's incidents or made mistakes on his part that took him out of getting points when he deserved to have much better points than what he got. At the same time, though, that consistency has been their biggest struggle over there. And I don't know if it's the lack of, communication with the crew chief or whatever. There's some sort of disconnect there that's been unfortunate for him. For the most part, though, with Suarez, it felt like this was always going to be how it went. When he signed a 1-year deal for 2025, it didn't give you a lot of confidence that he would return, especially with Connor Zilisch in the waiting. And we don't know if Connor Zilisch is officially going to take over that 99 car or whatever, car number they have for next year. But he does have a Trackhouse contract. He is in the Xfinity Series on a potential 1-year deal, with JRM. So on loan from Trackhouse, it's whatever. It's a joint deal between the two teams. So whoever takes over for that car is going to get into a car that has won races, but has also struggled for consistency at times as well. Now, I think we all can just are assuming that Connor Zilisch is going to be in there. Somebody I'm going to tell you who's not going to be in there. I know a lot of fans are going to be in the comments. I've already seen them as well being like, Kyle Busch, hire him. Kyle Busch is not getting hired by Trackhouse. That's just not going to happen. He has a deal with RCR for 2026. It doesn't make any sense for Trackhouse to buy him out of that deal, then pay him his salary to race for a season before they put Connor Zilisch. That's just not going to happen. They'd rather put Connor Zilisch in because at this point, they think that Connor Zilisch can probably get the same results that a Kyle Busch could. And guess what? Connor's going to be a lot cheaper than what Kyle Busch was or is as well. So for the most part, I think that's probably the play that they're going to do here. For Suarez, where does he end up at? Listen, there's not a lot of competitive cup rides out there right now. And I personally would love to see Daniel go down to the Xfinity Series and clean up down there because I think he has all the confidence of a cup driver, and we've seen that in the Xfinity Series, Eric Almirola, and that allows him to go out there and win races. If he can find a sponsorship package, landing over at JRM in that open car, if Zilisch does end up moving up next year, could be a great opportunity for him because, like I said, he's probably going to win 5-6 races next season if he ends up over there and contend for a championship. And now I get it. I 100% understand not wanting to step down, right? That is the hardest thing. John Hunter Nemechek did it and wasn't sure if he'd ever get back. And others have done it and not made it back. But for Suarez, I think stepping down to there and doing it although we've already seen him prove himself in the Xfinity Series, we absolutely have. I think that would be better than running at the back in a Cup car that has no real business being out there. And like I said, there's not a lot of opportunities out there right now that we know about, at least for Cup drivers. There could be, right? There's definitely some potential things that could happen, but nothing that is, open or even widely known to be going on. So for Suarez, I don't think anybody is super surprised by this news, but it's unfortunate, especially, coming off of Mexico a few weeks ago and a great showing down there for him and the crowd and everything like that. Connor Zilch probably ends up in that car, but for now, Daniel Suarez will not return to Trackhouse in 2026. One of the biggest news stories of the week, and obviously it was Ware Racing last week sold, but now the amount of money that Ware Racing sold for is absolutely staggering. So on Monday's Door Bumper Clear episode, Freddie Kraft at the very end of it, around like the 1 hour and 20 minute mark or so, kind of asked Tommy Baldwin, if the rumors in the garage area were true, because they had heard north of 9 figures. So people keeping track at home, 6 figures is 100,000, 7 figures is $1 million, 8 figures is 10 million, 9 figures means $100 million or more. Now, I had somebody reach out to me in the industry this morning, texted me and said, hey, that number, the 100 million number is wrong. And I said, oh, was it less than that? Because I assumed it would be less than that. And he said, no, more. I was like, oh, substantially more? And he said, if you consider potentially maybe a couple more tens of millions of dollars more, then yeah. And I was like, oh, so that's expensive. That's very expensive. And considering these are Ware Racing charters, these aren't Hendrick Motorsports or Joe Gibbs charters. These are some of the lesser valuable charters out there, and they're taking in that much money for it. And now I don't know what the sale included, if it's just charters or if it comes with cars, equipment, kind of a turnkey operation here. I would imagine for north of 9 figures it would be that, because 2 charters probably puts you around $80 to $90 million in that range, based off of some of the numbers that have been floating around that we've heard. But Ware got absolutely paid. I mean, the Ware Racing empire, the one time held 4 charters. They were a super team at one point in 2021. They owned 4 charters. He made it. He got it done. The guy went from running in the back, flipping charters, becoming really the first person to recognize like the true value in a charter, or at least the amount of charter movements. And now he has last year was more competitive when he had Justin Haley in the car. Cody Ware this year, he's improving, right? Not a stock car guy necessarily by trade, but he's slowly and steadily getting better. I did think it was funny when Tommy Baldwin was like, yeah, he's like, we used to be racing the 88 car every week in SVG, but he's figured it out, so he's not racing with us anymore. He's like, now we only got one guy racing with us, Riley Herbst. And he said, once he figures it out, we'll just be racing ourselves back there, which is kind of a funny little jab at their own team. But it's not that Rick hasn't put money into the organization, because we saw that last year when he did put money in the organization, they could run pretty well. And we've seen Corey LaJoie be in contention on drafting track races, to potentially, take a win or get a top 10 or something like that. So to see him walk away with a 9-figure payday, like, hey, that's great for Rick Ware, because the guy's got a lot of flack in this sport for running his operation how he does. Now, the Ware Racing empire has expanded. The IndyCar, NHRA, as well as getting involved in World Supercross and stuff like that. Now, he's, I believe, announced that they're expanding their NHRA team to 2 cars, which is great for him. Obviously, Clay Milliken's over there and the 51 Top Fuel Dragster with them. Expanding to 2 cars is great. He's got 9 figures now in the bank account that he can sit back and decide whatever he wants to do next. And we always joke, my friends and I do, that the Ware Racing empire will somehow find their way to Formula One. Listen, Ware Racing, Rick Ware, now has the funds, if he wanted to, just put that RWR logo on a Formula One car for a season, and he could really get it done, which would be absolutely bananas. Fools finally, climb to the upper echelon of motorsports there, right? Climb the motorsport mountain if he manages to get to Formula One. But 9 figures for Ware Racing is an absurd amount of money, but also you got to sit back and think that, like, teams like Hendrick Motorsports, Team Penske, Joe Gibbs Racing, if that's $100 to $150 million, somewhere in that range, so they're sitting on what, $500 million at this point for their 4-car operations, if not a little bit more. Yeah, like teams are becoming very, very valuable at this point, and the charter system is in part to thank for that, and that's what the team owners wanted out of this. And I know people are going to complain, well, Dale Jr.'s not going to be able to buy one now. This limits the amount of people that come in. I completely understand where you're coming from, but this is just kind of the world that we live in. And teams wanted some sort of equity value, and a charter gives them that. And now they've got it. And good Lord, do they have it. And some numbers that we typically don't hear floating around NASCAR. So good for Rick Ware. Now, switching over to the other side of the bit of a Rick Ware battle here, Legacy Motor Club. Jimmy Johnson talked on his podcast about LMC's desire to expand to a 3-car team, which we thought was going to happen in 2026 when we thought they had an agreement to buy one of those charters from Rick Ware Racing. Now, that's not happening. Rick Ware was like, hey, we don't want to sign for 26. We were good with 27. Jimmy Johnson was like, oh, and not Jimmy Johnson specifically, but Legacy Motor Club was like, oh, we thought it was 2026. They went to court. The judge gave them an injunction that was like, hey, your charter's staying with you over here at Rick Ware. There's still some legal things to sort out over there. I don't think that we're going to see Rick Ware lose one of their charters to Legacy Motor Club, but things are still ongoing. So I didn't clarify that enough in a video that I did last week about it. Rick Ware Racing in return has countersued Legacy Motor Club. So they're just kind of going back and forth here. But Jimmy talked openly about Legacy's desire to have that third team. And they want it by 2026. Where are they going to get a charter at? I'm not entirely sure there. I know people are going to probably toss them out for, switching over to a new manufacturer when it comes in, specifically Dodge, because, Petty was with Dodge. Richard Petty isn't an owner in this team anymore. He is just an ambassador to the team. At this point, Jimmy just spent the week in Japan based on his Instagram, hanging out with the Toyota executives and getting a tour and everything over there. So I think they're pretty ingrained in Toyota, and they've really turned the corner over the last month, 2 months, and they're starting to run really, really well with that 42 and that 43 car. So I don't think that he's leaving Toyota. But expanding to a third car means that you have to find a charter out there. And right now, I don't know of any charters that are available per se, outside of really making a huge offer to somebody out there, which obviously could be done. But who would they even put in to drive that car? Obviously, when this came around the first time, the third charter talk for Legacy expanding to a third car, there's a lot of people that are like, oh, it's going to be Corey Heim. It's not going to be Corey Heim. I can almost guarantee you it will not be Corey Heim. He has a 2311 racing deal, and that's going to get sorted out for him for 2027, more than likely. The name that kept popping up was Jesse Love. And that doesn't shock me at all. Jesse Love is not a guy that is tied to a manufacturer, right? He came up in the ARCA series with Venerini driving Toyotas over there. The Xfinity Series ride at RCR opens, and he goes over there to hop into that car and has won 2 races now. Yeah, and then had his other one disqualified when he won at Rockingham, and that went to Sammy Smith. But he's a guy that is certainly talented, had a really, really strong Xfinity Series season. Not Xfinity Series, ARCA Series season when he won the championship. Has had a lot of speed in Xfinity, just has to close the door on some of these races that are on non-drafting tracks. And he did that at Rockingham, but again, got it taken away for a legit reason. They were getting some help from the rear end of that race car. But he's a guy that definitely can bring some budget and can make that move over there if that's the direction that they wanted to go. Because I would imagine that there's likely a clause in his contract with RCR that would allow him to take a Cup Series ride if offered, if one's not offered by RCR in a timely manner. I don't know what the inner workings of his contract are. I'm just speaking on how I've seen other ones, and we've seen other ones play out before, that could be a possibility. Jimmy also mentioned that he's really impressed with Connor Zilic. I can guarantee you Trackhouse is not going to let Connor Zilic go. They would rather kick Daniel Suarez to the curb before letting Connor Zilic go and put him in that car next year. Again, not sure what his contract says or how long his contract is for either. But I do remember Dale saying that his Xfinity deal was for 1 year, for 2025. So obviously everything can be re-upped again for another year if they wanted to leave him in Xfinity for another year. But I thought those were interesting names that Jimmy openly talked about. I don't think we're going to see any movement with Zilic. I think he's very much in the Trackhouse fold and is destined to be a part of a super team sooner rather than later, more than likely. And then you have Jesse Love, who I think is a really formidable race car driver, high up on people's list. And in his, Cup Series starts that we've seen so far, hasn't been the best, but that third RCR car really just never runs very well when it shows up at the racetrack. I'm not really sure why that is. Obviously RCR as a team has struggled, but that 33 car, whenever it shows up, seems to really struggle at times. But hey, if Legacy can find a third charter for 26, that'd be great. But Jimmy said, hey, if not 26, then definitely for 2027. Turns out that the wealth management fund that invested in the team sounds like they want to spend some money, which isn't a bad thing. More competitive cars on the track is a good thing, but right now we have a demand for charters and we don't have the supply for them, so that price is going to continue to go up until a new OEM joins, and then potentially we get 4 more charters, and then things can get pretty interesting from that aspect as well. Now, I did see the Formula One movie on Monday, and let me give you a very quick review. If you don't want spoilers, go ahead and turn it off now, because it's just gonna be spoilers to the end, and then I'm gonna say, hey, follow me on socials, so you won't miss anything if you don't want to hear anything. It was fine. It was fun. I'll say that. It was a fun movie to sit down and watch. I thought the racing scenes were really well shot. Obviously, a lot of them were shot in races during the race weekend. Then they would put in the Apex GP cars to race around, like Max and all the Ferraris and stuff like that. I thought that was really well done. I enjoyed that aspect of it. The actual storyline, a lot of holes in it. Didn't really love it. I don't need a love interest. Apparently, we're out here just hooking up with technical directors now, drivers and technical directors hooking up. She's a female, so don't get any, if you're, like, oh my God, I can't believe, it's not what you might think. She's a woman, he's a man. The Bible Belt would approve, other than maybe the adult. No, I guess they're probably both single. Doesn't matter. Who cares? I thought that part was weird. They also made women seem very mistake prone in the movie as well, which felt unnecessary at times and a bit surprising considering Lewis Hamilton was one of the producers to help on that movie. When it comes to the timeline of how things work, this is where you as a race fan need to just set your brain aside and don't get wrapped up in it, because I was not pleased with the way that the timeline worked. Basically, Sonny Hayes, Brad Pitt's character, wins the Rolex 24 at Daytona. That night, he's in a laundromat in Florida trying to map out how to get to Ensenada for the Baja 1000, which, again, we'll get back to that timeline as well. And in walks Javier Bardem, his character. And he offers him a ride in Formula One because he needs a driver for the last 9 races of the Formula One season because they're halfway through their season. Now, you and I, as wheel knowers, as motorsport fans, know that the Rolex 24 Hours at Daytona happens at the end of January every single year. So you're telling me that Formula One is halfway through their season in January? What is this, Formula E? No, that's not how this timeline works, because Brad Pitt's character goes from Florida to the next weekend being in Silverstone for the British Grand Prix, which is in July, notoriously. So I don't know what happened in that 6-month period in real life, but in the movie, they very much think that it's just week to week, and that's how it happened. So that was unfortunate. Seeing the Rolex 24 Hours of Daytona in a movie theater, sick. Love to see that. That was really fun. Sonny Hayes' character is exactly what you think. If you've seen Driven, you've seen a iteration of the Formula One movie. Veteran driver, hasn't raced in a long time, comes in to mentor his young rookie teammate. Exactly what this is right here. Brad Pitt's character raced in Formula One in the 90s against Ayrton Senna and everybody else, had a bad accident at Jerez. The onboard cameras, the helmet cameras that they had back in 93, apparently we've just all missed out on them, because in the movie they make them seem absolutely phenomenal. They added some grain to it to make it look like it was from the 90s, but yeah, I've never seen helmet cams quite look that great from back in the day. Anyways, he hasn't raced in Formula One in 30 years. He goes straight from sports car racing into a Formula One car and is only a 1/10 of a second off of his rookie teammate. Like, that's just not how things work. One, he doesn't have the super license points to do that. He would need an exemption. We know Americans don't get exemptions here. But then to just hop in and be that quick, he also completely junked the car as well. In the actual races that they have with Sonny Hayes and Joshua Pierce, Brad Pitt's character, Sonny Hayes, does a lot of quote-unquote race fixing. Like, he purposely wrecks into people to make sure that there's a safety car period. Like, he very much fixed races, and we just promoted that. We banned a guy for life for doing that, and then we let him back in, but that's a different story. That aspect was weird. He was clipping off front wings of his car left and right. He was driving through those styrofoam boards on the side of the track. Like, all of that was very weird. The crash sequences, if you've seen Driven, you saw, I believe, Bo Brandenburg go flipping off into the trees, catch on fire and everything. Same thing happens at Monza. It looks reminiscent of the F3 crash that we saw at Monza, where they hit the sausage curb and go up in the air, but he crashes into the trees, bursts into flames. Sonny Hayes has got to get out and rescue him. It was just all a bit too hokey in that aspect of it. The other thing, Apex Grand Prix, Apex GP, worst team on the grid, running 21st and 22nd every single week. In 9 races, they went from being the worst team on the grid to winning the race in Abu Dhabi. That is a completely unrealistic expectation. Let's be honest here. Like, we all know that's not going to happen. It doesn't matter what little tweaks you make to the floor. You're not going from last on the grid to first. And Fernando Alonso wants to know how they managed to go from like 15th at Abu Dhabi to winning the race, because he lost the championship not being able to do that. So there's some holes in the plot for sure. Enjoyable movie. If you've seen Top Gun Maverick, there's a lot of similar type of shots that come with it, which again, I thought it was beautifully shot. I thought that the racing scenes were great. The story just, but it wasn't made for motorsport fans. I'll say that. It wasn't made for motorsport fans to sit down and be like, oh yeah, this is, true to what it is. I was thankful that there wasn't like any excessive shifting and things like that. Everything for that part, kind of stuck in. Seeing an F2 car race, obviously F2 cars have a bit of a backfire, so you see a flame out the exhaust sometimes. Formula One cars don't do that. And it was pretty noticeable when they showed the racing scenes that it wasn't an actual Formula One car. But overall, I thought it was a fun enough movie. I think I would recommend seeing it in theaters just because it's a cool experience just to see Formula One cars and racing scenes on a screen that big. But yeah, if you don't want to see it in theaters, like just sign up for an Apple TV Plus subscription whenever it goes on to streaming and watch it there, because it's still worth the watch. So let me know in the comments what you think about the Rick Ware Racing potential sale price. Legacy Motor Club wanting to expand to 3 cars. Should Atlanta get the 4th of July weekend? And did you enjoy the Formula One movie as well? Like and subscribe to the channel. Follow me on TikTok @BreakHard, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook @BreakHardBlog.